The snow fell relentlessly upon Harrington Manor, blanketing the 1930s English countryside in a deceptive shroud of peace. Christmas Eve, 1933. Inside the grand hall, adorned with holly and twinkling lights, guests gathered around the roaring fire. Sir Reginald Harrington, the imposing industrialist, raised his glass for a toast. To family and fortune, may betrayal never touch us. His voice boomed with irony. As the claret touched his lips, a spasm contorted his face. He clutched his throat, eyes widening in accusation before collapsing amid shattered crystal. Screams pierced the night. Who among the merry assembly had orchestrated this Yuletide murder? Chapter 1. The arrival of guests. The chauffeur, a taciturn fellow named George, navigated the final bend with the caution of one who knew the roads could turn treacherous without warning. Poirot had engaged George years ago precisely for this quality. Reliability without the nuisance of unnecessary conversation. Tonight, however, even George's silence carried weight. The invitation to Harrington Manor had arrived unexpectedly, penned in the bold, impatient hand of Sir Reginald Harrington himself, an old acquaintance from the war years, when Poirot's reputation as a detective had first begun to eclipse his modest origins in the Belgian police. "Mon ami," the letter had read, "come and lend your little gray cells to a Christmas gathering. The snow will keep us snug, and I have a matter that may amuse you. Besides, Evelyn insists upon civilized company." The postscript scrawled in haste. "Bring your appetite for intrigue." Poirot had smiled at that. Sir Reginald had always possessed a theatrical flair, a trait that had served him well in amassing a fortune in steel and coal, and rather less well in maintaining domestic harmony. The detective had accepted partly out of curiosity, partly because the prospect of a quiet Christmas in his Baker Street flat, surrounded by the inevitable cacophony of London's seasonal revelry, held little appeal. Now, as the manor loomed into view, its Gothic silhouette softened by snow, Poirot felt the familiar prickle of anticipation. The house was vast, a sprawling edifice of stone and ivy built in the exuberant excess of the mid-Victorian era, when industrialists sought to proclaim their ascendancy through architecture. Turrets pierced the sky like accusatory fingers. Windows glowed amber against the dusk, promising warmth within. Yet there was something oppressive about the place, as though the weight of its history pressed down upon the present inhabitants with the same inevitability as the snow upon the ground. George brought the car to a halt before the porte-cochere. A liveried footman emerged, his breath pluming in the frigid air, and opened the door with a bow that managed to convey both deference and resentment. Poirot stepped out, his patent leather shoes crunching satisfyingly on the fresh powder. He adjusted his Homburg hat, tugged the cuffs of his overcoat into perfect alignment, and surveyed the scene with the precision of a watchmaker. "Bonsoir," he murmured to the footman, who merely nodded and took his valise. Poirot followed, his short, brisk steps leaving a trail of neat impressions in the snow. The front doors, massive oak affairs studded with iron, swung inward as if by invisible hands, revealing a cavernous entrance hall lit by a chandelier that must have required a small army of servants to maintain. The air was heavy with the scent of pine, beeswax, and something sharper, tension perhaps, or the metallic tang of old money. Waiting at the foot of the grand staircase stood Mr. Graves, the butler. He was a tall man, gaunt as a winter birch with a face carved into lines of perpetual disapproval. His black suit was immaculate, his white gloves spotless, yet there was a flicker in his pale eyes that suggested depths beneath the professional mask. Poirot recognized the type, a man who had served the same family for decades, who knew every secret and buried them all beneath layers of impeccable courtesy. "Monsieur Poirot?" Graves intoned, his voice as dry as parchment. Welcome to Harrington Manor. The master is expecting you. Enchanté, Poirot replied, removing his gloves with deliberate care. And Madame Harrington? Lady Evelyn is in the drawing room with the other guests. If you will follow me. They proceeded across a floor of black and white marble that gleamed like a chessboard. Portraits of Harrington ancestors glowered down from the walls, men with mutton chop whiskers and women in crinolines, their eyes following Poirot with the suspicion reserved for foreigners. A suit of armor stood sentinel in one corner, its visor lifted to reveal nothing but darkness within. The detective resisted the urge to tap it with his cane. One must not antagonize the ghosts before dinner. The drawing-room doors opened onto a scene of calculated festivity. A fire roared in a grate large enough to roast an ox. Holly and ivy draped the mantelpiece. A Christmas tree, imported no doubt from Norway, towered in the bay window, its branches laden with glass ornaments that caught the firelight and threw it back in fractured rainbows. The room smelled of cinnamon, brandy, and the faint, acrid undertone of cigar smoke. Lady Evelyn Harrington rose from a velvet chaise longue with the grace of a woman who had been trained from birth to command attention. She was perhaps 45, though her skin retained the porcelain smoothness of youth, and her hair, a rich chestnut, was arranged in soft waves beneath a diamond tiara that seemed almost modest in this setting. Her gown was emerald silk, cut low enough to reveal the famous Harrington pearls, each one the size of a pigeon's egg. "Monsieur Poirot," she exclaimed, extending a gloved hand. "How utterly delightful! Reginald has spoken of you often, your brilliance, your singular methods." Her smile was warm, but her eyes, green as her dress, held a wariness that Poirot filed away for later consideration. "Madam," he said, bowing over her hand with a flourish that would have done credit to Versailles, "the pleasure is mine. One does not often receive an invitation to such a promising gathering." A snort from the vicinity of the fireplace drew his attention. Edward Harrington, the only son and heir, lounged against the mantel with the careless elegance of a man who had never known consequence. He was 26, handsome in the dissipated way of those who spend too much time in Mayfair clubs, with his father's hawkish nose and his mother's green eyes. His evening clothes were impeccably tailored, but his tie was slightly askew, and there was a flush on his cheeks that suggested the decanter had been generous. "Poirot, eh?" Edward said, raising his glass. "The famous sleuth. Father says you can sniff out a lie faster than a bloodhound. Care to test your talents on me?" His tone was jocular, but there was an edge to it, a challenge. Poirot smiled blandly. "Monsieur, I assure you my nose is reserved for more piquant aromas. The bouquet of a fine Bordeaux, perhaps." Edward laughed, but it was a brittle sound. He turned back to the fire, swirling the brandy in his glass with unnecessary vigor. Near the Christmas tree stood Amelia Harrington, the daughter. She was 22, with the restless energy of a colt straining at the traces. Her hair was cut in a daring bob that would have scandalized her grandmother, and her gown, silver lame, clung to her slender frame in a manner that suggested Paris rather than the home counties. She was arranging ornaments with fierce concentration, as though the placement of a single glass angel might determine the fate of nations. "Amelia, darling," Lady Evelyn called, "do come and greet our guest." Amelia turned, her expression a mixture of boredom and defiance. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, offering a limp hand. "I've read about you in the Tatler. They say you solved the Orient Express murder. Was it terribly gruesome?" "Mademoiselle," Poirot replied, "gruesome is a matter of perspective. To the victim, perhaps. To the detective, it is merely inconvenient." She laughed, a sharp, bright sound that cut through the room like a shard of ice. Well, you'll find plenty of inconvenience here. Father's in one of his moods. As if summoned by the mention of his name, Sir Reginald Harrington strode into the room. He was a bull of a man, broad-shouldered and barrel-chested, with a mane of iron-gray hair and a mustache that rivaled Poirot's own in magnificence. His evening coat strained at the buttons, and his face was flushed with the combined effects of fire, brandy, and temperament. "Poirot!" he boomed, clapping the detective on the shoulder with a force that would have felled a lesser man. "By God, it's good to see you. Thought you might cry off with this damned weather." "Sir Reginald," Poirot said, steadying himself, "one does not decline an invitation from a man who signs his letters with such flair." Sir Reginald threw back his head and laughed, a sound like gravel poured into a bucket. "Flair, eh? That's one way to put it. Come, let me introduce you to the rest of the happy family." He gestured toward the door where a new figure had just entered. Victor Lang was a slight man in his 50s, with the pallor of one who spent too much time indoors counting other people's money. His suit was expensive but ill-fitting, as though he had lost weight recently and lacked the inclination to replace his wardrobe. His eyes darted nervously around the room, lingering on Sir Reginald with a mixture of deference and resentment. "Lang, you remember Poirot," Sir Reginald said. "My partner in the Northern Mills. Keeps the books so I don't have to." Lang extended a damp hand. "A pleasure, monsieur. Sir Reginald speaks highly of your discretion." Poirot noted the hesitation. Discretion was a quality much prized in business, especially when the books in question might not bear close scrutiny. The final guest arrived moments later, announced by Graves with the solemnity of a town crier. Miss Clarissa Thorne was Sir Reginald's secretary, a brisk woman in her 30s with a severe bun and a tweed skirt that spoke of efficiency rather than fashion. She carried a leather folio under one arm and a look of perpetual exasperation. "Miss Thorne keeps me from drowning in paperwork," Sir Reginald explained, "and from making promises I can't keep. Don't know what I'd do without her." Miss Thorne allowed herself a thin smile. "Someone must ensure the empire runs smoothly, Sir Reginald." Dinner was announced at 8, the gong reverberating through the halls like a death knell. The party processed into the dining room, a cavernous space paneled in dark oak and hung with tapestries depicting medieval hunting scenes. The table was set for 9. Poirot counted quickly, with place cards in Lady Evelyn's elegant script. He found himself seated between Amelia and Miss Thorne, opposite Edward, with Sir Reginald at the head, and Lady Evelyn at the foot. Victor Lang was to Sir Reginald's right, Graves hovering like a black-clad spectre. The first course, consommé madrilène, was served with the precision of a military operation. Poirot sipped his soup, observing. Edward drank his wine as though it were water. Amelia picked at her food, her foot tapping an impatient rhythm beneath the table. Victor Lang kept his eyes on his plate while Miss Thorne maintained a stream of quiet conversation with Lady Evelyn about household matters. Sir Reginald dominated the table, as was his habit. "Christmas," he declared, raising his glass, "is a time for family, for loyalty, for settling old scores." His gaze swept the table, lingering on each face in turn. "And I intend to settle a few before the new year." A silence fell, broken only by the crackle of the fire in the adjacent grate. Poirot noted the reactions. Lady Evelyn's fingers tightening on her napkin, Edward's flush deepening, Amelia's eyes narrowing, Lang's hand trembling as he reached for his glass, Miss Thorne's sudden interest in her soup. Graves refilled the wine glasses with the smooth efficiency of long practice. Poirot watched the butler's hands, steady but with a slight tremor when he passed Sir Reginald. Interesting. The second course, roast goose with chestnut stuffing, was accompanied by a story from Sir Reginald about a business rival who had tried to undercut him in the coal trade. "Thought he could betray me," Sir Reginald said, carving the bird with unnecessary violence. "Ended up ruined. There's a lesson there." Edward muttered something under his breath. Poirot caught the word hypocrite. Amelia leaned toward the detective. "Father collects betrayals the way other men collect stamps," she whispered. "He'll show you his album after dinner." Poirot smiled. "Mademoiselle, I look forward to the exhibition." As the meal progressed, the conversation grew increasingly strained. Sir Reginald announced that he had revised his will to ensure loyalty. Edward laughed bitterly. "Loyalty? You wouldn't know it if it bit you." Lady Evelyn's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Edward, that's enough." But Sir Reginald was in his element. "Let the boy speak. He's got debts up to his eyeballs. Gambling, women, God knows what. Thinks I don't know about the checks he's been forging." Edward's face went white. "You bastard! Language!" Lady Evelyn snapped. Victor Lang attempted to intervene. "Reginald, perhaps this isn't the time." "The time is exactly now," Sir Reginald roared. "I've been betrayed by my own flesh and blood, by partners who smile to my face and stab me in the back, by servants who—" He stopped abruptly, his eyes fixed on Graves, who stood impassive by the sideboard. The butler's face remained expressionless, but Poirot saw the muscle jump in his jaw. Dessert, plum pudding with brandy butter, was served in near silence. The Christmas crackers were pulled with mechanical enthusiasm, the paper crowns donned without joy. Poirot's cracker revealed a tiny silver whistle. He twirled it thoughtfully between his fingers. As coffee was poured, Sir Reginald pushed back his chair. "To the drawing room," he announced. "I have an announcement to make, one that will clarify certain matters." The party rose, the scrape of chairs loud in the hush. Poirot lingered, watching Graves clear the table with methodical precision. The butler's hands moved with the grace of long practice, but there was something, a hesitation as he lifted Sir Reginald's wine-glass. Poirot's eyes narrowed. In the drawing-room, the fire had been built up, and the Christmas tree lights twinkled with malevolent cheer. Sir Reginald positioned himself before the hearth, his shadow looming large on the wall behind him. "My friends," he began, "this Christmas marks a turning point. I have uncovered disloyalties, betrayals that strike at the heart of this family, this house, this empire. Tonight I will name names." A collective intake of breath. Edward reached for the decanter. Amelia's hands clenched in her lap. Lady Evelyn sat very still, her face a mask. Victor Lang looked as though he might be sick. Poirot, seated in a corner armchair, observed it all with the detachment of a scientist watching an experiment unfold. The tension was palpable, a living thing that coiled around the room like smoke. Sir Reginald raised his glass. "To family," he said, his voice dripping with irony, "and to the betrayals that bind us." He drank deeply, and then quite suddenly his face contorted. The glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the hearth. He clutched at his throat, eyes bulging, a gurgling sound escaping his lips. "Betrayed," he rasped, "by my own—" He collapsed, his body hitting the rug with a thud that seemed to shake the very foundations of the manor. For a moment, no one moved. Then chaos erupted, screams, shouts, the crash of overturned furniture. Lady Evelyn fainted into Miss Thorne's arms. Edward stood frozen, brandy spilling from his glass. Amelia backed away, her hand over her mouth. Victor Lang stared at the body as though it were an accounting error. Graves was the first to act, kneeling beside his master, feeling for a pulse. "He's dead," he announced, his voice flat. Poirot rose smoothly, his mind already racing. He knelt beside the body, noting the foam at the corners of Sir Reginald's mouth, the faint odor of bitter almonds. Cyanide, fast-acting, administered in the wine perhaps. He stood surveying the room. "Mesdames et messieurs," he said quietly, "we have a murder." Outside, the snow continued to fall, sealing them in with the corpse and the secrets it had taken to the grave. Chapter 2. Whispers by the Fire. The drawing-room fire had sunk to a sullen glow, its embers pulsing like a dying heart. Sir Reginald Harrington lay where he had fallen, one arm flung outward as though in final accusation, the shards of his crystal tumbler glittering around him like frost. The Christmas tree lights, still winking in mechanical cheer, cast garish reflections across the corpse's contorted face. No one had dared move him. Even the pragmatic Miss Thorne stood frozen, her folio clutched to her chest as though it might shield her from the horror. Hercule Poirot stood apart, his small, neat figure a dark silhouette against the firelight. He had removed his gloves and now turned them over in his hands with the absent precision of a man counting rosary beads. His eyes, those sharp, green eyes, missed nothing. The tremor in Lady Evelyn's lace handkerchief, the way Edward's gaze kept sliding to the decanter, the almost imperceptible tightening of Graves's jaw as he stared at his fallen master. "Mes amis," Poirot said at last, his voice soft yet carrying to every corner of the high-ceilinged room. "We must be calm. Panic is the ally of the murderer, non. The snow has made us prisoners here, but it has also preserved the scene. Nothing must be touched until the police arrive, though that may not be until morning." Edward gave a short, bitter laugh. "Police? In this weather? We're buried, Poirot. Might as well be on the moon." "Precisely," Poirot replied, unruffled. "And on the moon one must rely upon the little gray cells. Graves, if you please. Close the doors. No one leaves this room until I have spoken to each of you." The butler hesitated for the fraction of a second, long enough for Poirot to note, then inclined his head and moved to obey. The heavy oak doors thudded shut, the sound echoing like a judge's gavel. Lady Evelyn stirred on the chaise where Miss Thorne had propped her. Her face was the color of old parchment, but her voice, when it came, was steady. "Reginald, poisoned? But who would—" She broke off, pressing the handkerchief to her lips. Poirot regarded her with sympathy tempered by calculation. "Madame, grief is natural. But so, alas, is motive. Your husband spoke of betrayals only moments before his death. We must consider who among us felt most betrayed." Amelia Harrington had retreated to the window, her silver gown catching the firelight like moonlight on steel. She stared out at the endless white, her breath fogging the pane. "He was going to name names," she said without turning. "He loved an audience for his little dramas, always the tyrant, even at Christmas." "Amelia!" Lady Evelyn's tone was sharp, but there was fear beneath it. Poirot moved to the mantel, his fingers brushing the holly garland. "Mademoiselle is correct. Sir Reginald intended a revelation, and revelations, like knives, can be dangerous in the wrong hands." He lifted a sprig of mistletoe, twirling it thoughtfully. "Let us begin with the wine. Graves, you poured the final glasses?" The butler stood at parade rest near the sideboard. "Yes, sir. The decanter was brought from the cellar this afternoon. I decanted it myself at 7:30. And the glasses, crystal, rinsed in the pantry. I filled them in the dining room, then carried the tray here." Poirot nodded. "Parfait. And who handled Sir Reginald's glass after that?" Graves' eyes flicked to Edward, then away. "No one, sir. The master took it from the tray himself." Edward flushed. "Are you accusing me, Graves? Because I was nowhere near—" "Patience," Poirot interrupted. "Accusations are premature, observation first." He knelt beside the body again, his movements delicate. The tumbler had held port, rich, dark, almost black in the firelight. A faint residue clung to the inside, crystalline like sugar, but Poirot's nose detected the telltale bitterness beneath the sweetness. Cyanide, yes. But how introduced? The port had been shared, others had drunk without harm. He straightened, brushing imaginary dust from his knees. The poison was in the glass, not the decanter. A personal attack. Someone knew which glass Sir Reginald would take. Victor Lang, who had been silent until now, cleared his throat. He sat hunched in an armchair, his thin fingers worrying at his cuffs. Reginald had enemies, he said, his voice reedy. Business rivals, men he'd ruined. But to do this, here, in his own house. Monsieur Lang, Poirot said gently, you were his partner. You knew his habits. Tell me, did Sir Reginald have a favorite glass? Lang blinked. Yes. The one with the family crest etched on it. He always used that for his port. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Voila. And tonight? It was on the tray, Graves confirmed. The master selected it himself. Lady Evelyn rose suddenly, her movements unsteady. This is intolerable. My husband lies dead and we speak of glasses. I must lie down. Poirot bowed. Of course, madame. Miss Thorne, perhaps you would accompany Lady Evelyn? And Graves. Ensure the upstairs corridor is watched. No one must be alone tonight. As the women left, Poirot turned to the remaining men. Now, messieurs, let us speak plainly. Sir Reginald mentioned debts, forgeries, disloyalty. Edward, you were angry at dinner. Edward drained his glass in one gulp. He was cutting me off, said I was a disgrace, the old hypocrite, preaching loyalty while he stopped, jaw working. While he what? Poirot prompted. Nothing. Edward's eyes darted to the door. I need air. You will stay, Poirot said firmly. Amelia, you argued with your father this morning about Paris, n'est-ce pas? He forbade your art studies. Amelia turned from the window, her face pale but defiant. He wanted to keep me in a cage, like mother, like all of us. She laughed, a brittle sound. But murder? That's his style, not mine. Victor Lang stood abruptly. This is madness. Reginald was difficult, but he didn't deserve this. Poirot watched him closely. Monsieur, you lost a great deal in the merger last year. Sir Reginald overruled you, yes? Took the profits for himself? Lang's face crumpled. He promised me a share, then changed the contracts. I was ruined, but I didn't. A sudden thud from the hallway made them all start. Graves re-entered, his composure cracked for the first time. Sir, the pantry window. It's been forced. Snow on the floor, footprints leading to the cellar stairs. Poirot's mustache twitched. Mon Dieu, the murderer seeks to escape or to destroy evidence. He strode to the door. Edward, Victor, come. We may yet catch them. They hurried into the corridor, the cold air sharp after the stuffy drawing room. The pantry door stood ajar, snow drifting across the flagstones. Footprints, small, neat, led down the narrow stairs into darkness. Poirot paused at the threshold, his hand on the banister. Attendez, he murmured. These prints, they are fresh. But look, the edges are already softening. Someone has been here very recently, and yet... He knelt, brushing snow from one print. The tread is light, a woman's shoe perhaps, or a man's but small. Edward swore under his breath. The cellar connects to the old passage, leads to the stables. They could be halfway to the village by now. Non, Poirot said. The snow is too deep, and the stables are locked. Graves confirmed it. No, our murderer is clever but not foolish. They wish us to believe they have fled. He straightened, his eyes glittering. Return to the drawing room. Lock the doors. I will examine the cellar alone. But, Victor began. Seul, Poirot insisted. The little gray cells function best without distraction. Reluctantly, they obeyed. Poirot descended the stairs, his flashlight cutting a narrow beam through the gloom. The cellar was vast, its vaults crammed with dusty bottles and crates. The footprints led to a wooden door at the far end, ancient, iron-bound. It stood ajar. Poirot approached cautiously. Beyond lay the old passage, its walls damp and crumbling. But the footprints stopped abruptly at the threshold. He shone his light on the floor, scuffed earth, then nothing. A clever illusion. The snow had been brushed away, the prints faked with a smaller boot. He smiled grimly. Très ingénieux, but Hercule Poirot is not so easily deceived. Returning upstairs, he found the household gathered in the hall, faces pale in the flickering gaslight. Lady Evelyn had rejoined them, supported by Miss Thorne. Amelia stood apart, arms wrapped around herself. "Well?" Edward demanded. Poirot brushed snow from his coat. "A false trail. Our murderer is still among us and very much in control of the game." From the drawing room, a sudden crash of glass made them whirl. The French window stood open, curtains billowing in the icy wind. Snow swirled across the carpet, and on the hearthrug lay Sir Reginald's body, moved, his arm now pointing toward the Christmas tree, and pinned to his lapel a single sprig of holly, its berries stained dark with what could only be blood. Chapter 3: The Fatal Feast. The dining hall of Harrington Manor was a cathedral of oak and silver, its vaulted ceiling lost in shadow, its long table a battlefield of crystal and candlelight. At precisely 8 o'clock the gong had sounded, 3 sonorous notes that rolled through the corridors like a funeral knell. Now, an hour later, the goose had been carved, the chestnut stuffing devoured, the claret decanted and redecanted until the air itself seemed stained with its ruby glow. Yet the feast had turned to ash in every mouth. Sir Reginald Harrington sat at the head of the table, enthroned in a high-backed chair carved with the family crest, a snarling wolf rampant. His face, flushed with wine and triumph, gleamed like a polished apple. He had dominated the conversation from the first remove, his voice booming over the clink of cutlery and the nervous laughter of his guests. "Family," he had toasted, raising his glass so high that the candlelight fractured into 1,000 shards within the crystal. "The one thing money cannot buy, though God knows I've tried to purchase loyalty with it." His laughter had been a cannonade, shaking the chandeliers. Hercule Poirot, seated 3 places down on Sir Reginald's right, had observed everything with the stillness of a cat at a mouse-hole. To his left, Amelia picked at her food with the disdain of a duchess forced to dine with peasants. Across the table, Edward drained his glass with mechanical regularity, his eyes bloodshot. Victor Long, opposite Poirot, kept his gaze fixed on his plate as though the pattern of the Wedgwood might offer salvation. Lady Evelyn, at the foot of the table, presided with the brittle poise of a woman balancing a crown of thorns. Miss Thorne, the secretary, sat to her right, taking occasional notes in a small leather book with the air of one recording minutes at a board meeting. Only Graves moved, a black shadow gliding between sideboard and table, refilling glasses with the precision of a metronome. The first course, consommé madeleine clear as amber, had been served without incident. The second, roast goose with all the trimmings, had seen the first cracks appear. Sir Reginald had carved the bird with theatrical flair, wielding the knife like a saber. "Edward, my boy," he had said, slicing a leg with unnecessary violence, "you'll have the dark meat. Suits your mood, eh?" The jest had fallen flat. Edward had merely stared, his knuckles white around his fork. Poirot had noted the tremor in Lady Evelyn's hand as she passed the cranberry sauce. He had noted, too, the way Graves' eyes lingered on Sir Reginald's glass, the one with the etched wolf, before moving on. 1,000 small details, each a thread in the tapestry he would later weave. Now, as the plum pudding was brought in flaming with brandy, Sir Reginald pushed back his chair. The legs scraped against the parquet with a sound like a scream. "Enough of this mummery," he declared. "It's time for truth." He reached for the decanter, port, rich and dark as blood, and poured himself a generous measure into the wolf-etched glass. "Graves, the others may have coffee in the drawing room. I'll join them presently." The butler inclined his head. "Very good, sir." The guests rose, murmuring excuses. Poirot lingered, watching as Sir Reginald swirled the port, inhaling its bouquet with the satisfaction of a connoisseur. The man's eyes gleamed with something that might have been anticipation or malice. Poirot could not yet tell. "Monsieur," Poirot said quietly, "a word, perhaps, before your announcement." Sir Reginald waved him away. "Later, Poirot, later. First I must settle accounts." He raised the glass in a mock toast to the empty room. "To Betrayal," he said, and drank. The effect was instantaneous. His eyes bulged. The glass slipped from his fingers, shattering against the table's edge. Port splashed across the white damask like a wound. Sir Reginald clutched at his throat, a guttural sound escaping his lips, half roar, half sob. His knees buckled. He crashed forward, his head striking the table with a sickening thud. The wolf-etched glass rolled, spilling its dregs across the wood where they hissed faintly, eating into the polish. For a heartbeat, the dining hall was silent but for the crackle of the fire in the grate. Then chaos erupted. Lady Evelyn's scream shattered the air like crystal. She stumbled back, her chair overturning. Edward stood frozen, his face drained of color. Amelia pressed herself against the wall, her hands over her mouth. Victor Lang made a strangled sound, half protest, half prayer. Miss Thorne's pen clattered to the floor. Graves was the first to move. He rounded the table in 3 strides, kneeling beside his master. His fingers sought the pulse at Sir Reginald's neck, then withdrew as though burned. "He's dead," the butler said, his voice flat as a gravestone. Poirot was already there, his movements swift and economical. He knelt, tilting Sir Reginald's head gently. The man's lips were blue, flecked with foam. His eyes stared sightlessly at the ceiling where cherubs danced in faded frescoes. The odor was unmistakable. Bitter almonds, sharp beneath the sweetness of the port. "Cyanide," Poirot murmured. "Fast-acting. In the glass, not the decanter." He lifted the shattered remnants carefully, noting the faint crystalline residue inside the wolf-etched bowl. Prussic acid, perhaps, a personal dose. Lady Evelyn swayed, clutching at Miss Thorne for support. "Reginald? Poisoned? But who—" "Madam," Poirot said gently, rising, "we must be calm. Graves, lock the dining room doors. No one enters or leaves until I have examined everything." The butler hesitated, his eyes on the body. "Sir, the police will come when the snow permits. Until then, I am the law here." Poirot's tone brooked no argument. Graves moved to obey, the key turning with a decisive click. Edward found his voice. "This is insane. Father had enemies, yes, but to do this at his own table." "Monsieur," Poirot interrupted, "your father spoke of settling scores. Someone settled them for him." He turned to the table, his gaze sweeping the debris. The port decanter stood untouched, its contents innocent. The other glasses, Edward's, Victor's, Amelia's, showed no trace of tampering. Only Sir Reginald's had been lethal. Amelia's voice was a whisper. "He always used that glass, the one with the wolf. He said it reminded him to stay sharp." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Précisément, a habit known to all. The poison was meant for him alone." He lifted a shard of crystal, holding it to the candlelight. A faint smudge, lipstick perhaps, marred the rim. And yet the application was clumsy, hurried. Victor Lang sank into a chair, his face ashen. Reginald was going to expose us all. The will, the debts, the merger, he had proof. Proof of what? Poirot asked sharply. Lang's hands trembled. He'd discovered I'd been creative with the accounts to cover my own losses. He was going to ruin me. Edward laughed, a harsh, broken sound. Join the club. He found out about my gambling debts, said he'd cut me off without a penny. Lady Evelyn's voice cut through the tension like a blade. And I? What was my crime, pray? Her eyes were bright with unshed tears, but her chin lifted defiantly. He was going to divorce me. Said he'd found someone younger, more amenable. Silence fell, heavy as the snow outside. Poirot moved to the sideboard where Graves had arranged the coffee tray. The butler stood rigid, his face a mask. Graves, Poirot said, you served the port? Yes, sir, from the cellar. I decanted it myself. And the glasses? Rinsed in the pantry. I placed them on the tray in order, Sir Reginald's first, then the others. Poirot's gaze was steady. You knew which was his? Graves met his eyes. Always, sir. The wolf. A sudden thud from the corridor made them all start. Graves moved to the door, unlocking it cautiously. Beyond lay only darkness and the faint scent of snow. But on the threshold, half buried in a drift that had blown through an open window, lay a single white envelope, sealed with red wax, addressed in a spidery hand, for Hercule Poirot. Poirot picked it up, breaking the seal with care. Inside was a single sheet of heavy cream paper. The message was brief, written in the same hand. The wolf is dead. Long live the wolf. The feast is not yet over. Beneath the words, a crude drawing, a sprig of holly, its berries black as blood. Poirot folded the note carefully, his face unreadable. Mes amis, he said quietly. The game has begun, and our murderer plays with a full deck. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the windows like a beast demanding entry. Inside, the candles flickered, casting long shadows that danced across the dead man's face. The feast was indeed not over. It had only just begun. Chapter 4. Poirot assumes command. The dining hall doors stood locked, the key now in Hercule Poirot's waistcoat pocket. Outside, the storm had settled into a steady, relentless fall, muffling the world to a hush broken only by the occasional creak of the Manor's old bones. Inside, the candles guttered in their silver sconces, throwing long, wavering shadows that made the tapestries seem to breathe. Sir Reginald's body lay beneath a damask tablecloth, the wolf-etched glass shards swept into a neat pile by Graves' trembling hands. The air was thick with brandy, fear, and the faint, lingering bite of cyanide. Poirot stood at the head of the table, Sir Reginald's throne now empty, and surveyed the assembled company with the calm authority of a general before battle. They had been herded back from the corridor where the mysterious envelope had appeared. No one had been allowed to retreat to bedchambers or brandy decanters. Lady Evelyn sat rigid on a high-backed chair, her pearls clutched like rosary beads. Edward paced, a caged animal in evening dress. Amelia leaned against a pillar, arms folded, silver lame dulled by candle smoke. Victor Lang had collapsed into a corner seat, mopping his brow with a monogrammed handkerchief. Miss Thorne stood beside Lady Evelyn, notebook open, pen poised as though minutes might still matter. Graves hovered near the sideboard, a black statue carved from suspicion. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice precise, carrying to every corner, we are imprisoned not merely by snow, but by murder. Until the authorities arrive, perhaps tomorrow, perhaps the day after, Hercule Poirot is in command. You will obey my instructions, or you will complicate a situation already très compliquée. Compris? Edward snorted. You're not the police, Poirot. No, Poirot agreed amiably. I am better. The police have rules. I have logic. He tapped his temple. And logic, mon ami, is a sharper blade than any truncheon. Lady Evelyn's voice was a thread. What must we do? First, we secure the scene. Poirot gestured to Graves. The dining room remains locked. No one enters without my presence. The body, liqueur, stays where it is. The port decanter, the glasses, the envelope, all untouched. Second, we establish alibis. Third, we search. Every room, every corridor, every cupboard. The poison did not administer itself. He produced a small leather notebook and silver propelling pencil. We begin with the moment of death. Sir Reginald drank at, he consulted his pocket watch, approximately 9:17. Graves, you carried the port tray from the pantry at what time? 9:12, sir. I decanted it at 9 sharp, then waited for the master's signal. Poirot nodded. Précis. And between 9:12 and 9:17, where was each of you? A brittle silence. Then Amelia spoke, defiant. I was in the ladies' cloakroom fixing my hair, alone. Edward. Billiard room practicing shots, also alone. Victor Lang. Library, looking for a book on estate law. His voice cracked. Lady Evelyn. Powder room off the hall. Miss Thorne accompanied me part way, then returned for her. Shawl. Miss Thorne confirmed with a nod. I was in the hall, then the cloakroom. I saw no one. Graves. Pantry, then here, serving. Poirot scribbled rapidly. Parfait. Solitude abounds. Now motive. Sir Reginald spoke of betrayals. Let us be frank. He fixed Edward with a stare. You, monsieur. Debts? Edward flushed crimson. 20,000 at White's. Father found the IOUs, threatened to cut me off. Amelia? She lifted her chin. He forbade Paris. Said art was for loose women. I told him I'd go anyway, inheritance or no. Madam? Poirot turned to Lady Evelyn. Her lips trembled. He had taken a mistress, a typist from the London office. He planned to install her here after the new year. Divorce papers were drawn. Victor Lang's turn. The merger. He rewrote the contracts. My share vanished. I faced bankruptcy. Miss Thorne closed her notebook with a snap. I merely work here. Poirot's eyes lingered on her. Mademoiselle's secretaries know everything, perhaps too much. Graves cleared his throat. I've served this family 30 years. Sir Reginald threatened dismissal last week, said I'd grown insolent. Poirot closed his notebook. Bon. Motives bloom like hothouse flowers. Now, opportunity. He moved to the sideboard, lifting the port decanter to the light. The poison was in the glass, not the wine. Cyanide crystals perhaps dissolved in the port. But how introduced? The tray was in the pantry, then carried here. Graves, you set the glasses? Yes, sir. In order, Sir Reginald's wolf glass first, then the others. Who could have tampered? Graves hesitated. The pantry door was unlocked. Anyone might have slipped in. Poirot's gaze swept the room. Anyone. We search. Now. He divided them into pairs. Edward with Victor, Amelia with Miss Thorne, Lady Evelyn with Graves. Poirot himself would take the pantry and cellar. Report anything unusual, touch nothing suspicious. They scattered like startled pheasants. Poirot descended to the pantry, flashlight beam cutting through gloom. The window Graves had mentioned earlier was latched, but snow had drifted beneath it. Footprints, small and neat, leading to the cellar stairs. He followed, noting the same scuffed termination as before. A red herring. But whose? In the cellar, among dusty bottles, he found a small glass vial, empty, corked, the faint almond scent unmistakable. Cyanide, but the dust around it was undisturbed. It had been placed recently. A plant? Upstairs, reports trickled in. Edward and Victor. Nothing in the billiard room save a broken Q-tip. Amelia and Miss Thorne in the ladies' cloakroom, a lipstick smudge on a hand towel. Lady Evelyn's shade. Lady Evelyn and Graves in the library, a forged check in Edward's handwriting. tucked behind a row of Dickens. Poirot gathered them in the hall. Intéressant, the check, Edward's motive, strengthened. The lipstick, Madame, you were in the powder room. Lady Evelyn paled. Yes, but I didn't. The vial, Poirot continued, holding it up, found in the cellar. But the dust tells a story, placed after the murder to mislead. Someone wishes us to look at Edward. Or at Graves, who knew the cellar. Edward lunged. You're accusing me? Non, Poirot said calmly. I am eliminating. The forger of the check is clumsy, ink still wet. The planter of the vial, clever. 2 hands or 1, very clever. A sudden scream from the drawing room. Amelia's voice. They rushed in. The Christmas tree stood askew, ornaments shattered. Beneath it a pool of dark liquid, port, and a single white glove monogrammed RH soaked crimson. Poirot knelt, not port. Blood, fresh. He lifted the glove, inside a scrap of paper. The wolf's secrets die with him, but one remains. The fire popped, sparks flying. In the hearth, a photograph curled and blackened. Sir Reginald Younger, arm around a woman, not Lady Evelyn. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Ah, the mistress, perhaps? Or another betrayal. The game deepens. He stood, surveying the shaken faces. Lock all doors. No one sleeps alone. Tomorrow we dig deeper, into hearts, into cellars, into the snow itself. Outside, the wind moaned like a mourning woman. Inside, the candles burned lower, and the shadows grew long enough to swallow secrets whole. Chapter 5. Shadows of the Past. The great hall of Harrington Manor had become a tribunal. Midnight had come and gone, yet no one slept. The chandelier's electric bulbs had been dimmed to a sullen amber, leaving pools of darkness between the islands of light. Snow hissed against the tall windows like 1,000 conspirators. Sir Reginald's body remained in the dining room, shrouded and locked, but his presence lingered, an accusing ghost in every corner. Hercule Poirot stood beneath the minstrel's gallery, a small, immaculate figure in the vast space. His overcoat was folded neatly over a chair. His patent shoes gleamed. In one hand he held the blood-soaked glove. In the other, the charred photograph fragment he had rescued from the fire. The assembled company sat in a ragged semicircle. Lady Evelyn on a velvet settee, Miss Thorne beside her like a stern nurse, Edward sprawling in an armchair, brandy glass trembling. Amelia perched on the piano stool, legs crossed, silver gown torn at the hem. Victor Lang hunched forward, elbows on knees, Graves standing behind Lady Evelyn, hands clasped, face carved from granite. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice soft yet carrying to the rafters, we have alibis that crumble, motives that flourish, and clues planted like poisoned seeds. But murder is not a garden. It is a machine, and every machine has a design. Tonight we dismantle it. He laid the glove and photograph on a low table. First, the glove, monogrammed R.H., Sir Reginald's, found beneath the Christmas tree, soaked in blood not his own. Whose blood, we shall discover. Second, the photograph, burned, yet enough remains. Sir Reginald, Younger, with a woman. Not Madame. He inclined his head toward Lady Evelyn. The mistress, perhaps, or another betrayal entirely. Lady Evelyn's hand flew to her throat. I knew of the typist, Clara Beecham, but there were others, always others. Poirot nodded. Précisément, betrayal is a habit with some men. Now the vial in the cellar. Empty, corked, cyanide residue. Dust undisturbed around it, yet the cellar door shows recent use. Someone wished us to find it, a false trail. He turned to Graves. You knew the cellar well. The butler's eyes did not flicker. 30 years, sir. I know every stone. And the pantry window. Forced earlier, footprints leading down, then vanishing. Another diversion. Poirot paced, hands clasped behind his back. The lipstick on the towel, Madame's shade. The forged check, Edward's hand. The broken Q-tip, the torn hem. All breadcrumbs. But to where? Amelia's voice cut through the tension. To the truth, perhaps. Father kept a safe in his study behind the Reynolds portrait. He bragged about it, said it held insurance against us all. Poirot's mustache twitched. Excellent, mademoiselle. We visit the study now. They moved as a silent procession, Graves carrying a candelabrum. The study door was locked. Graves produced a key from his waistcoat. Inside, the air was heavy with cigar smoke and the scent of old leather. Books lined the walls. A massive partner's desk dominated the center. Above the mantel, the Reynolds portrait, a stern Harrington ancestor, glowered down. Poirot approached the painting, running his fingers along the frame. A soft click. The portrait swung outward on concealed hinges. Behind lay a steel safe, its dial gleaming. "Graves," Poirot said. "The combination?" The butler hesitated. "Sir Reginald changed it monthly. I never knew the final—" "Non," Poirot interrupted gently. "You knew. You listened at keyholes, as good butlers do. Try his birthday, 12-0409. Graves' hands moved to the dial. A pause, then the soft thunk of tumblers. The door swung open. Inside, ledgers, share certificates, a bundle of letters tied with red ribbon, a small velvet box. Poirot lifted the letters first, the top one, in a feminine hand. "My darling Wolf, Clara awaits you in London. Leave the old hag to her pearls." Signed C.B. Lady Evelyn made a strangled sound. Next, a will, dated 3 days prior. Poirot scanned it rapidly. Edward disinherited entirely, Amelia to receive a trust controlled by trustees until age 30. Victor Lang's partnership dissolved, debts called in. Lady Evelyn, annuity only, the manor to be sold. The bulk, to a trust for my true heir. Edward lunged forward, and the bastard— "Patience," Poirot snapped. He opened the velvet box. Inside, a locket, gold engraved with a tiny wolf. Within, a curl of dark hair and a photograph. A child, perhaps 5 years old, with Sir Reginald's eyes. Amelia gasped. That's me, but I'm 22. "Non," Poirot said softly. "Look closer. The date on the back, 1928. This child is 5. You were born in 1911. This is another daughter, illegitimate, perhaps." "The true heir." Victor Lang's voice was a croak. "Clara Beecham was pregnant when she left the firm last year. Reginald paid her off. Hush money." Graves spoke for the first time, his voice hollow. "There was talk below stairs, a cottage in the village, a child. Sir Reginald visited monthly." Poirot closed the locket. "Voilà, the deepest betrayal, a secret family. But how does this lead to murder?" He replaced the items, shutting the safe. "We search the cottage tomorrow when light permits. Tonight we watch." They returned to the hall. Poirot assigned rooms, Lady Evelyn and Miss Thorne together, Edward and Victor, Amelia with Graves outside her door. He himself would patrol. At 2:17 a.m., a scream shattered the silence. Amelia's room. Poirot arrived first, flinging open the door. Amelia stood by the window, pointing. On the snow-covered lawn below, a figure in black moved swiftly toward the trees, a child's silhouette carrying something that glinted. Poirot raced downstairs, the others behind. The front door stood ajar. Snow had drifted across the threshold. Outside, footprints, small, bare, led to the edge of the garden, then vanished into the woods. Back inside, Amelia was trembling. It was a child, with father's signet ring. Poirot examined the carpet, a single drop of blood still wet. He followed it to the staircase, up to the attic door, locked. Graves produced another key. The attic was a cavern of discarded furniture and trunks. In the center, a child's cot, freshly made up. On it a rag doll and the signet ring smeared with blood. Poirot lifted the doll. Beneath, a note in childish scrawl. The wolf's cub watches, the feast continues. He turned to the group, his face grim. Mes amis, we are not hunting one murderer, but two, the adult who poisoned Sir Reginald and the child who bleeds for revenge. The wind howled louder as though the manor itself mourned. Somewhere in the dark, a clock struck 3. The shadows lengthened, and the secrets of Harrington Manor stirred like beasts awakening. Chapter 6. Unraveling Alibis. The great hall had become a tribunal of shadows. Candles guttered in their sconces, the chandelier's bulbs had been extinguished to conserve power, leaving only the fire's sullen glow. Snow pressed against the windows like a living thing, muffling the world to a hush broken only by the wind's low moan. The rag doll lay on the table beside the blood-smeared signet ring, its button eyes staring with childlike accusation. Hercule Poirot stood at the head of the table, the charred photograph fragment and the locket from the safe now added to the grim display. His small figure was immaculate despite the hour. Mustache waxed, shoes polished, the crease in his trousers sharp enough to cut glass. The others sat in a ragged semicircle, exhaustion etched into every face. Lady Evelyn's pearls were gone, replaced by a shawl clutched like a shield. Edward's tie hung loose. His eyes were bloodshot. Amelia's silver gown was torn and stained. She had refused to change. Victor Lang's hands trembled as he lit one cigarette from the stub of another. Miss Thorne's notebook lay open, pages filled with cramped shorthand. Graves stood behind Lady Evelyn, a dark pillar of stoicism. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice cutting through the hush like a scalpel. We have danced around the truth long enough. Alibis, motives, clues. Tout must now be dissected. The poison in the wolf glass, the vial in the cellar, the forged check, the bloodied glove, the child in the snow, the secret heir. These are not random, they are a pattern, and Hercule Poirot sees patterns where others see chaos. He lifted the signet ring. This belonged to Sir Reginald, found in the attic cot beside a doll and a note in childish scrawl, the blood fresh. Whose? Miss Thorne spoke for the first time in hours. I can type it. There's a microscope in the old nursery. Sir Reginald kept medical supplies for the village. Poirot nodded. Bon, later. First, alibis. We reconstruct the fatal 5 minutes. He produced his notebook. 9:12. Graves carries the port tray from pantry to dining room. 9:17. Sir Reginald drinks and dies. Between those minutes, who could have tampered with the wolf glass? Graves stepped forward. The tray was in the pantry, unlocked for perhaps 3 minutes while I fetched the coffee urn. Anyone might have entered. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Anyone. Yet the pantry window shows forced entry, snow on the floor, footprints to the cellar. A diversion. The real tampering occurred earlier. He turned to Edward. You were in the billiard room, alone. Yet the Q-tip was broken, fresh splinters. You struck something in anger? Edward flushed. I missed a shot. The cue hit the floor. No, Poirot said. The break is clean, deliberate. You struck the wall, perhaps, to create noise, an alibi of sound. Edward opened his mouth, then closed it. Amelia, Poirot continued, the ladies' cloakroom, the lipstick-smudged towel, Madame's shade. You were there? Amelia nodded. Fixing my hair. Mother came in briefly, then left. Lady Evelyn's voice was a whisper. I needed air. The powder room was stifling. Poirot's gaze was gentle but relentless. Madame, you handled the decanter earlier. During dinner. You refilled Sir Reginald's claret? The wolf glass was beside it. She paled. I poured for everyone. Précisément. but only one glass was poisoned. The port was added later, in the drawing room. Victor Lang stubbed out his cigarette. I was in the library, I heard nothing. Poirot lifted the forged check. Found behind Dickens. Your handwriting, Edward? Edward's jaw worked. I wrote it months ago. Father found it. Threatened to expose me. No, Poirot said. The ink is fresh, still tacky. Written tonight. To mislead. He moved to the bloodied glove. Found beneath the Christmas tree. R.H. monogram. But Sir Reginald wore no gloves at dinner. This is a dress glove. Smaller. A woman's? Amelia's hand flew to her mouth. Mother's. From the cloakroom. Lady Evelyn shook her head. I lost a pair weeks ago. I thought... Planted, Poirot said. Like the vial, like the footprints. He lifted the locket. This child, the secret heir. Clara Beecham's daughter, 5 years old. The cottage in the village. Who knew? Graves spoke. Below stairs gossip. The housemaid saw Sir Reginald's car there monthly. Miss Thorne closed her notebook. I typed the payments. Hush money. £500 quarterly. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Voila, the deepest betrayal. But the child in the snow, barefoot in this cold. Impossible, a ruse. Someone dressed as a child, or... He paused. Or the child is here. In the manor. A collective gasp. Poirot continued. The attic cot, fresh linen, the doll, new, the ring, taken from Sir Reginald's finger after death. Someone brought it there, but why? He turned to Graves. You locked the attic? Always, sir. Since the old nursery was closed. Yet the key was on your ring. Poirot held up the butler's keychain, a single key missing. Found in the snow outside the child's footprints. Graves' face remained impassive. I must have dropped it. No, Poirot said, taken, to create the illusion of an outsider. But the child's note, the wolf's cub watches. The cub is here, and the cub bleeds. He lifted the rag doll. Beneath its skirt, a hidden pocket. Inside, a lock of dark hair, Sir Reginald's, and a tiny vial half full of clear liquid. Cyanide. The poison, Poirot said softly. Not planted in the cellar, carried by the child, or the child's proxy. Amelia's voice broke. There's a dumbwaiter from the old nursery to the kitchen. I used it as a girl. It's hidden behind the pantry. Poirot's mustache twitched. Excellent. The murderer used it, to move unseen, to plant clues, to create the ghost child. He gathered the evidence. Now the sequence. The wolf glass was poisoned in the pantry during the 3-minute window. The murderer knew Sir Reginald's habit. The vial was taken from Lady Evelyn's medicine cabinet. She keeps cyanide for photographic developing. The glove, the check, the footprints, all diversions. Lady Evelyn stood. You're saying Patience, Poirot said. The lipstick on the towel, yours. But the smudge on the wolf glass rim, a different shade. Amelia's. Amelia gasped. No, Poirot interrupted. You lent your lipstick to Miss Thorne earlier. She returned it. Smeared. Miss Thorne's pen clattered. I borrowed it to touch up. Poirot's eyes were steady. You were in the pantry, mademoiselle, to fetch Sir Reginald's heart pills. You saw the tray. You knew the wolf glass. You had access to the cyanide, Lady Evelyn's cabinet where you file her correspondence. Miss Thorne's face crumpled. He was going to dismiss me. Said I knew too much about Clara, about the child. He'd ruin me. Silence fell, heavy as the snow. Poirot continued. You poisoned the glass. Used the dumbwaiter to move the vial, the glove, the ring. Dressed in a child's nightgown from the attic. Barefoot in the snow for seconds only to leave prints. The blood, your own, from a cut finger. The note, your handwriting disguised. He lifted the doll. But you made one mistake. The dumbwaiter rope, frayed, a fiber caught in your skirt. He held up a silver thread matching Amelia's gown. You borrowed the gown earlier to frame her. Miss Thorne sank to her knees. He betrayed us all. The child, she's innocent. I wanted him to suffer as we suffered. Poirot's voice was gentle. Mademoiselle, justice is not yours to dispense. Graves stepped forward, handcuffs from the old gamekeeper's kit ready. The storm raged on, but inside the truth had cut through the lies like a blade. Chapter 7. The Butler's Secret. The confession of Miss Clarissa Thorne hung in the air like frost that would not melt. She knelt on the turkey rug, spectacles askew, the prim bun of her hair unraveling into gray wisps. The fire had sunk to embers, the candles were mere stubs. Outside, the snow had eased to a gentle, relentless drift, but the manor remained sealed, roads impassable, telephone lines down. Dawn was still hours away, and the house felt like a mausoleum with living statues. Hercule Poirot stood motionless at the table's head, the silver thread from Amelia's gown pinched between thumb and forefinger. The rag doll, the signet ring, the half-empty cyanide vial, the forged check, the bloodied glove, all lay in a grim constellation before him. He regarded Miss Thorne with the detached compassion of a surgeon who has located the tumor. Mademoiselle, he said quietly, you have confessed to the mechanics of the crime. The wolf glass poisoned in the pantry, the dumbwaiter as your secret passage, the child's nightgown and footprints to terrify us, the blood from your own finger. Très ingénieux. But confession is not completion. There is a deeper betrayal here, one that reaches beyond Sir Reginald's grave. Miss Thorne's lips trembled. I've told you everything. He ruined lives. Mine, Clara's, the child's. I only wanted justice. Non, Poirot replied. You wanted chaos. You wished us to chase shadows while the true architect remained hidden. He turned slowly, his gaze settling on Mr. Graves. The butler stood behind Lady Evelyn's chair, hands clasped, face as impassive as ever. Yet Poirot noted the faint tremor in the left eyelid, the microscopic shift of weight from one foot to the other. Graves, Poirot said almost conversationally, you have served this family 30 years. You have heard every quarrel, seen every indiscretion, polished every silver spoon that carried poison to a tyrant's lips. Tell me, when did you first know of the child? A hush deeper than the snow outside. Graves' eyes flicked to the locket on the table, then to Poirot. I overheard Sir Reginald on the telephone 2 years ago. He spoke of a cottage, a girl named Rose. Payments. Précisément, Poirot said. And you said nothing. Loyalty? Or something more? Graves's voice was a dry whisper. Loyalty, sir? To the house. Poirot stepped closer. Yet you threatened to expose him last week. Lady Evelyn heard you in the corridor. I know about the girl, sir, and the money. You demanded a pension, a cottage of your own. Sir Reginald refused. He called you insolent. He threatened dismissal. Lady Evelyn turned, staring up at the butler. Graves, is this true? The butler's mask cracked. He was going to cast me out after 30 years. No reference, no savings. I have a sister, invalid. I needed... Silence, Poirot commanded gently. You needed, yes, but you did not act alone. He lifted the locket, opening it to reveal the curl of dark hair and the child's photograph. This hair, tested under Miss Thorne's microscope, matches Sir Reginald's. But the photograph... Look at the eyes, not his, the mother's, Clara Beecham. Yet the child's name is Rose Harrington. She was acknowledged in secret, and you, Graves, delivered the payments monthly. You were the link. Graves's shoulders sagged. He trusted me, said I was the only one who never betrayed him. Irony, Poirot murmured. For you betrayed him most completely. He turned to the group. Observe, Miss Thorne poisoned the glass, motive, dismissal, and exposure. But the cyanide came from Lady Evelyn's darkroom. The child's nightgown was stored in the attic trunk. Graves had the key. The footprints in the snow, small, but the stride too long for a 5-year-old. Graves wore the gown over his livery, walked on his knees, the blood, his own from a cut made with Sir Reginald's letter opener found in the pantry. Edward laughed, a hollow sound. The butler did it? Cliché, Poirot. Non, Poirot said. The butler enabled it. Miss Thorne conceived the crime. Graves executed the theater. Together they created the ghost child to terrify us, to point suspicion everywhere and nowhere. Miss Thorne looked up, eyes wide. I acted alone. Graves knew nothing. Menteuse, Poirot said softly. You borrowed Amelia's gown to plant the silver thread. But the dumbwaiter rope, frayed in 2 places. One break from your weight, mademoiselle. The second, taller, heavier. Graves used it to move the doll, the ring, the note. He left the key in the snow to suggest an outsider. Graves' voice was barely audible. He ruined my sister's life too. Years ago. Seduced her when she was a housemaid. She bore a child, stillborn. He paid her off, sent her away. I stayed, to watch him, to wait. Lady Evelyn rose, trembling. You hated him all these years? I served him, Graves said. Every morning I polished his boots. Every night I laid out his clothes. I smiled while he boasted of his conquests. When Miss Thorne came to me, desperate, furious, I saw my chance. Not murder, justice. Poirot's eyes were steady. You gave her the cyanide. You showed her the dumbwaiter. You staged the child's apparition, but you made one error, mon ami. The signet ring. Sir Reginald wore it on his right hand. You removed it after death. Yet the skin beneath was unmarked by tan. He had not worn it in weeks. It was in the safe with the locket. You took it to complete the illusion, but the ring was too loose on your finger. You dropped it in the attic, stained it with your blood to match the glove. Graves stared at his hands. I wanted him to be remembered as a monster, not a martyr. Poirot turned to Miss Thorne. And you, mademoiselle, you believed you acted alone. But Graves manipulated you. He suggested the child's costume, the footprints. He planted the forged check to implicate Edward, the lipstick to implicate Lady Evelyn. He wished the family destroyed, not merely the master. Miss Thorne began to sob. He said it would be clean, one death, the rest would scatter. Non, Poirot said. He wished them to tear each other apart. The perfect revenge. Silence fell, broken only by the wind. Poirot gathered the evidence into a neat pile. The crime is solved. Miss Thorne, poisoner. Graves, architect of terror. Motives intertwined like ivy on a tomb. He produced 2 lengths of curtain cord. Until the police arrive, you will be confined. Graves to the wine cellar. Miss Thorne to the pantry. Guards will be posted. Edward and Victor stepped forward, grim-faced. Amelia watched, tears streaking her cheeks. Lady Evelyn sank back, whispering, 30 years. As Graves was led away, he paused beside Poirot. The child, Rose, she's innocent, in the village with Clara. Promise me. Poirot's voice was gentle. Monsieur, the innocent will be protected. The guilty, they have betrayed themselves. The butler was taken below. Miss Thorne followed, head bowed. The doors closed with a soft thud. Poirot turned to the weary survivors. Dawn approaches, the snow will melt, the police will come, but tonight we have unmasked the deepest betrayal, not of flesh but of trust. The butler did not merely serve the wolf, he became the wolf. The fire gave one final pop, then died. In the darkness, the manor seemed to exhale as though a long-held breath had finally been released. Chapter 8. False trails converge. The manor's clock struck 4, its chimes muffled by the weight of snow and secrets. The great hall felt smaller now, the high ceilings pressing down like a lid on a boiling pot. Embers glowed faintly in the grate. The candles had been extinguished to hoard wax. The evidence table stood as a silent altar. The wolf-etched glass shards, the cyanide vial, the bloodied glove, the child's locket, the forged check, the rag doll with its hidden pocket. Miss Thorne sat bound in the pantry, her sobs echoing faintly through the walls. Graves was chained in the wine cellar, his stoic mask shattered into silence. Hercule Poirot paced before the fire, his small feet leaving precise impressions in the soot-strewn rug. His mind, the little gray cells, whirred like a precision watch. The others watched him warily, Lady Evelyn wrapped in her shawl, eyes hollow. Edward nursing a fresh brandy, his flush deepened by doubt. Amelia curled on the settee, silver gown a crumpled shroud. Victor Lang chain-smoking, ashes scattering like confetti at a funeral. "Mes amis," Poirot said, halting abruptly, "we have confessions. Miss Thorne, the poisoner; Graves, the puppeteer of shadows. Motives intertwined, alibis unraveled. Parfait." Yet, he twirled his mustache, eyes narrowing. Yet Hercule Poirot is not satisfied. A confession is a door, not the house. And this house has hidden rooms. Edward snorted. "They admitted it, Poirot. What more do you want, blood?" "Précisément," Poirot replied. "Blood. The blood on the glove, the ring, the doll. Tested under the microscope, human type O. Miss Thorne's is A, Graves' is AB. Sir Reginald's O. But whose, then?" Victor Lang stubbed his cigarette. "The child's? Rose?" Poirot shook his head. "No, a child's blood would clot differently, fresher perhaps. This was adult, and the cut, deliberate, shallow, self-inflicted for drama." Amelia sat up. "You're saying they lied?" "Ou bien," Poirot said. "They were led. Graves, 30 years of resentment. Miss Thorne, fear of ruin. But the crime is too elegant for rage alone. The wolf glass poisoned precisely. The dumbwaiter used with architectural knowledge. The child ghost, psychological terror, not mere diversion. No, this is a mind that plans like a chess master, and chess masters do not sacrifice their kings lightly." He moved to the table, lifting the silver thread. "This, from Amelia's gown, planted on the dumbwaiter rope, but the rope frayed in 2 places, yes. Yet the lower, fray. Higher tension. Someone taller than Miss Thorne. Graves? Peut-être. But Graves's shoes, size 10, polished daily. The attic dust shows prints, size 6, narrow. A woman's." Lady Evelyn's hand tightened on her shawl. "You can't think." Poirot's gaze was gentle. "Madam, let us retrace. The pantry window, forced from inside, snow brushed in, the footprints to the cellar, ending abruptly because brushed away with a broom from the pantry. The vial, placed in dust undisturbed for months, yet the cork freshly scored. Clumsy plants, but effective red herrings." He lifted the forged check. Edward's hand? Non. The loop on the Y is too perfect, traced perhaps from a genuine signature in the safe, and the lipstick on the wolf glass rim, not Amelia's, not Miss Thorne's. A deeper rose, Madame's evening shade. Lady Evelyn paled. I refilled glasses at dinner." "Oui, and you handled the port decanter when Graves brought it. A moment alone while he fetched napkins, cyanide crystals from your dark room where you develop photographs of the family. For killing highlights, you said once. But cyanide kills more than shadows." Edward stared at his mother. "You?" But Thorne confessed. "Confessions can be bought," Poirot said, "or coerced. Graves, loyal to the house but broken by it. He discovered your affair letters, Madame. The ones to the London solicitor planning divorce after Sir Reginald's announcement. He confronted you. Miss Thorne overheard. You persuaded them. Promised Graves his pension, Thorne a new position. In exchange, they took the blame, temporarily. The child ghost, Your idea to evoke pity for the secret heir. The blood. Yours from a prick with your pearl brooch. The loose bead snagged on the decanter cork. Lady Evelyn's pearls clicked as she clutched them. This is madness. I loved him. No, Poirot interrupted softly. You endured him. The betrayals, the mistress, the child, the will that left you penniless. On Christmas Eve, he toasted loyalty while planning to cast you out. You snapped. Poison in the port, personal, intimate. Then the theater, framing Victor with the planted vial, Edward with the check, Amelia with the gown thread. Even Graves and Thorne, scapegoats to buy time until the snow melted. Victor Lang's voice was hoarse. But the dumbwaiter. Graves showed her. Graves showed you nothing, Poirot said. He protected the house. But you, madam, you knew every creak, every secret passage from childhood games. The attic cot? You prepared it weeks ago, stealing the child's locket from the safe to build your narrative of the wronged heir. The note in childish scrawl, your hand, disguised with your left. Amelia's eyes filled with tears. Mother? Why? Lady Evelyn stood, regal even in defeat. He betrayed us all. The affair with Clara. It wasn't the first. Rose isn't his only bastard. There was another, Edward's real father, a stable boy. Reginald married me for money, then discarded me like a worn glove. The will? He laughed as he signed it. To my true heir, he said. I couldn't let him win. Poirot nodded. The deepest betrayal, matrimonial. You framed others to scatter suspicion. Thorne and Graves, loyal fools, agreed to confess, believing you'd exonerate them later. But their alibis cracked under my logic. The blood type, the footprints, the bead. He lifted a small object from his pocket, a single pearl bead, threaded with a hair. Found in the decanter's neck. Your necklace, madam, snagged in haste. Silence enveloped the room. Outside, the first hint of dawn grayed the windows. Poirot's voice was solemn. The false trails converge here. On you, Lady Evelyn Harrington, the poisoner, the architect, the wolf in pearls. She sank back, the fight draining from her. It was perfect, until you. Madam, Poirot said, perfection is for the little gray cells. Crime is merely human. Edward turned away, disgust etching his features. Amelia wept openly. Victor Lang lit another cigarette with shaking hands. Poirot gathered the evidence. At dawn, we summoned the village constable, snow or no. But first, a final gathering, in the drawing room, where it began. We will hear your full confession, madame, and lay this Christmas betrayal to rest. As they moved toward the door, a faint sound echoed from the cellar, Graves' voice calling faintly. Madame, you promised. Lady Evelyn's step faltered, but Poirot urged her forward. The trails had converged, but one shadow lingered. Would the loyal butler break fully or take the final secret to his grave? The drawing room awaited, fire stoked anew. The Christmas tree lights flickered as though the manor itself held its breath for the end game. Chapter 9. The Gathering Storm. The drawing room had become a confessional. Dawn's first pale light seeped through the frost-laced windows, turning the snow outside to pearl. The Christmas tree stood sentinel, its glass ornaments dulled by dust and dread. The fire had been built high. Flames licked greedily at fresh logs, throwing capering shadows across the walls. Sir Reginald's body had been moved to the library, shrouded, locked, but his absence was a presence more oppressive than his life. Hercule Poirot stood before the hearth, the evidence laid out on a card table like a macabre game of patience. The wolf-etched glass shards, the cyanide vial, the bloodied glove, the child's locket, the forged check, the pearl bead, the silver thread. Lady Evelyn Harrington sat in the center of the room, wrists bound with silk scarf, Poirot's concession to decorum. Her emerald gown was torn at the hem, Her pearls lay discarded on the rug like scattered hail. Edward stood by the window, back rigid, staring at the white expanse as though it might swallow him. Amelia sat on the piano bench, knees drawn up, face buried in her hands. Victor Lang occupied a corner chair, cigarette unlit between his fingers. Miss Thorne and Graves had been brought up from their makeshift cells. Thorne pale and trembling, Graves hollow-eyed but composed, wrists similarly bound. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice resonant in the hush, "we gather for the final act. The storm has passed, the snow begins to melt. Soon the police will come. But before they take Lady Evelyn, we must hear the truth. Complete, unvarnished. The little gray cells demand order." Lady Evelyn lifted her head. Her eyes, once bright with command, were dull with defeat. "You've won, Poirot. Ask your questions." Poirot inclined his head. "Madame, begin with the poison, the cyanide, from your dark room." "Yes," she said, voice steady. "I used it for toning photographs. A pinch in the port, enough to kill in minutes. I waited until Graves brought the tray, then slipped into the pantry while he fetched napkins. The wolf glass was unmistakable." "Précisément," Poirot said. "And the decanter cork your pearl bead caught as you pressed it back." She nodded. "Clumsy. I was hurried." Edward turned, fury etching his features. "You murdered him in cold blood, your own husband." "My jailer," she corrected bitterly. 30 years of humiliations, the affairs, the bastards, the will that left me a pauper. On Christmas Eve, he toasted loyalty while planning to install Clara Beecham in this house. I snapped. Amelia's voice was a whisper. "And us? You framed us, your children." Lady Evelyn's gaze softened. "Never to harm, only to confuse. The forged check, traced from Edward's old letters, the silver thread from your gown, Amelia, snipped while you slept. The lipstick on the glass, mine, but smeared to match Miss Thorne's borrowed tube. Diversions, darlings, to buy time until the snow melted and I could flee to the continent." Victor Lang's cigarette snapped in his fingers. "And me? The vial in my coat?" "Planted," she said. "While you smoked in the library, Graves helped, reluctantly. He hated Reginald more than any of us." Graves spoke, voice gravel. "She promised me a cottage, a pension, said Thorne would take the blame, then be exonerated. I staged the child ghost, wore the nightgown, left the footprints on my knees. The blood was mine, cut with the master's letter opener." Miss Thorne's head jerked up. "You used me. I thought I acted alone." "No," Poirot interrupted gently. "You were the perfect pawn, mademoiselle. Lady Evelyn discovered your fear, dismissal, ruin. She fed you the cyanide, showed you the dumbwaiter, convinced you Sir Reginald's exposure would destroy you. You poisoned the glass, believing you struck first, but Madame had already planned every move." Lady Evelyn's lips curved faintly. "Clarissa was desperate. Graves was broken. I gave them purpose and scapegoats." Poirot lifted the locket. "The child, Rose, you knew of her?" "Reginald boasted," Lady Evelyn said. "Showed me the locket once, drunk on brandy and triumph. My true heir," he slurred. "I stole it from the safe weeks ago, prepared the attic cot, wrote the childish notes. The ghost child was to be my final flourish. Pity for the wronged bastard, suspicion scattered like confetti." Amelia's tears fell. "You used a 5-year-old's innocence." "Innocence," Lady Evelyn echoed. "Reginald had none. Rose is safe in the village with Clara. I sent money monthly, anonymously. She'll inherit nothing now. The will is void with his murder." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Ah, but the will was your trigger. Disinherited, humiliated, replaced. You acted alone in the poison, but with accomplices in the theater. Graves moved the ring, the doll. Thorne planted the vial, the glove. You orchestrated the panic, the forced window, the blood, the footprints, all to mask the simplicity, A wife's revenge. He turned to Graves. You confronted her last week, threatened exposure unless she paid. She turned your hatred into alliance. Graves nodded slowly. I wanted him to suffer in memory, a monster, not a martyr. And you, mademoiselle? Poirot asked Thorne. She wept. He was going to ruin me. The letters I typed, Clara's pleas, the child's birth certificate. He laughed as he dictated. Lady Evelyn said we'd share the blame, then freedom. Poirot gathered the evidence. Voila. The storm of false trails converging on Madame. The perfect crime, nearly. But the little gray cells see through snow. Lady Evelyn met his gaze. How did you know? The pearl bead, Poirot said. Snagged in the cork, your necklace loosened in haste. The lipstick shade, too deep for Thorne, too deliberate for accident. The dumbwaiter rope, frayed high and low, but the higher fray showed silk fibers from your gown's lining. You wore it beneath your dress to move unseen. And the blood, type O but with traces of photographic fixer. From your dark room, she laughed, a broken sound. Details, always details. Edward stepped forward, voice raw. You destroyed us for what? Pride? For survival, she said. He would have taken everything, house, children, name. I took his life instead. Silence fell, heavy as the melting snow outside. A distant rumble, snow sliding from the roof, the world awakening. Poirot's voice was solemn. The police will come. Lady Evelyn, to the gallows perhaps. Graves, Thorne, accomplices, prison. The innocent. Edward, Amelia, Victor, free but scarred. Amelia stood facing her mother. I hated him. But you're worse. Lady Evelyn's eyes filled. Forgive me. Never, Amelia whispered. Poirot turned to the window. The sky lightened to rose. The gathering storm ends. But one twist remains. Who sent the envelope? The wolf is dead. Long live the wolf. He lifted the cream paper, examining the wax seal, a tiny wolf's head. From the safe. Your seal, madam, written before the murder, to be delivered by Graves if you were caught. A final taunt. Lady Evelyn smiled faintly. Insurance. Poirot folded the note. The storm is over. The truth stands bare. As the first rays of sun touched the Christmas tree, gilding the ornaments in blood-red light, the manor seemed to exhale. The betrayal was complete. But so was the revelation. The wolf was dead. The wolf's mate had struck the fatal blow. And in the cold light of Christmas morning, the survivors faced a future as uncertain as the melting snow. Chapter 10. Resolution and Reflection. The sun rose blood-red over Harrington Manor, its light striking the snow into a million diamonds. Icicles wept from the eaves. The world was melting, roads clearing, the isolation ending. Inside the drawing room, the Christmas tree lights had been extinguished, the fire banked to ash. The evidence table stood cleared, items boxed, labeled in Poirot's neat hand, ready for the police. Sir Reginald's body lay in the library awaiting the coroner. The air smelled of cold pine, spent wax, and the faint, lingering bitterness of cyanide. Hercule Poirot stood by the window, hands clasped behind his back, watching the village constable's sleigh approach through the slush. His green eyes reflected the dawn. His mustache was immaculate despite the sleepless night. The survivors gathered in a loose semicircle transformed by truth. Edward in shirt sleeves, tie discarded, face haggard but clear-eyed. Amelia in a borrowed dressing gown, silver lame folded away like a discarded skin. Victor Lang smoking his last cigarette, shoulders squared for the first time. Miss Thorne and Graves seated apart, wrists unbound now, faces blank with resignation. Lady Evelyn in the center, emerald gown changed for a simple black dress, pearls gone, hair loose, yet still regal, a queen awaiting the axe. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot said, turning from the window. The case is closed. The police arrive. But before they take you, madam, and you, messieurs et mademoiselles, let us reflect. Murder is never simple. It is a tapestry woven of betrayal, and this Christmas tapestry is complete. Lady Evelyn spoke first, voice calm. I have nothing left to hide. Ask what you will. Poirot inclined his head. Madam, the final detail, the envelope, delivered before death. How? Graves, she said. I wrote it weeks ago, sealed it with the wolf crest, instructed him to leave it if I were accused, a last laugh. Graves nodded. In the corridor, during the panic after the footprints, slipped it under the dining room door. Miss Thorne's voice was small. I thought it was my idea, the child ghost, but it was hers all along. Oui, Poirot said. Lady Evelyn orchestrated every note. The poison, the diversions, the scapegoats, Graves, your hatred made you pliable, Thorne, your fear made you blind, but the little gray cells saw the conductor behind the orchestra. Edward stepped forward. And us? The children he betrayed? Poirot's gaze softened. You, monsieur, disinherited but free now. The will is void. The estate passes to you and Amelia jointly. Sell the mills, pay the debts, begin anew. Amelia's tears had dried. I'll go to Paris, paint, live. Victor Lang crushed his cigarette. The partnership dissolves. I'll take my losses and rebuild. Honestly this time. Poirot turned to the accomplices. Graves, 30 years of service, twisted into vengeance. The courts will be lenient, accessory, not principal. A cottage, perhaps, for your sister. Graves bowed his head. Thank you, sir. Thorne, your crime was fear. Prison, yes, but not the rope. Miss Thorne whispered. I only wanted to matter. The sleigh bells jingled outside. The constable, a burly man named Hargreaves, entered with 2 deputies stamping snow from their boots. Poirot greeted them in crisp French, then English, handing over the evidence box and a typed summary. Lady Evelyn Harrington, murder, Graves and Thorne, accessories. The rest, witnesses. Hargreaves nodded, producing handcuffs. Lady Evelyn rose gracefully, offering her wrists. No need for steel, constable, I'll come quietly. As she was led away, she paused beside Poirot. You're a terrible man, Hercule Poirot, terrible and brilliant. He bowed. Madam, I am merely the servant of truth. Edward and Amelia followed the police to give statements. Victor Lang lingered, shaking Poirot's hand. The mills, will you advise the sale? Non, Poirot smiled. I solve crimes, not balance sheets, but choose honesty, monsieur. It pays better than forgery. Graves and Thorne were taken last. The butler paused at the door. The child, Rose? Poirot's voice was gentle. Safe. I telephoned the village from the stable loft. Line restored at dawn. Clara Beecham will keep her. A trust fund anonymously from the estate sale. She will want for nothing. Graves' eyes filled. Thank you. The door closed. The manor emptied. Poirot stood alone amid the wreckage of tinsel and tragedy. He moved to the Christmas tree, lifting a single glass ornament, a tiny silver wolf. He turned it in the light, then placed it carefully in his pocket. George, the chauffeur, entered. Car's ready, sir. Roads are passable. Poirot donned his overcoat, hat, gloves. Bon. To the station, then London. A hot bath, a tisane, and perhaps a small celebration. Christmas is not yet over. As they drove away, the manor shrank in the rear view, Gothic spires against a clearing sky. Poirot watched it fade, the silver wolf cool against his palm. Mon ami, he murmured to George. Reflect upon this. Betrayal is the sharpest blade, but truth is the whetstone. This Christmas the wolf was slain by his mate, the cubs set free, the pack scattered. And Hercule Poirot, He returns to his little gray cells content. George glanced back. "Will you write it up, sir? Another case for the papers?" Poirot smiled. "No. Some stories are too painful for ink. This one ends here, with snow melting, secrets buried, and a new year dawning." The car turned onto the main road, tires crunching through slush. Behind them, Harrington Manor stood silent, its windows blind, its ghosts at rest. The Christmas betrayal was over. The resolution, bittersweet, inevitable, had come with the sun. Poirot closed his eyes, the silver wolf warm now in his hand. Justice like snow covers all, but truth like spring always returns.